Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Saturday. Saturday, Saturday. Yes, not Sunday. I think I almost said Sunday there. I hope you're all wonderful and well. Welcome to everybody in the chat, all the wenches with wrenches. I see you in full force. And yeah, us flames of the south are still chilly, yeah, but we winning. So welcome. It's wonderful to see you all again. And of course, I have with me this evening the amazing, I always say Dr. Jerry Marzinsky. He says he's not a doctor, but I think he's more qualified than most doctors out there. So we'll just I don't know, we'll just call him Dr. Jerry. And we're going to be talking about some of his supernatural experiences this evening that he's had in his work, where he's done a lot of work in these high security places, pretty much for the insane and criminally insane as well over the years, and of course discovered many amazing, um, I want to say secrets, yes, because they'd never reveal the stuff to the public. So we're going to be chatting more about that. And other than that, I just have some announcement tomorrow. Of course, for those of you that join the Patreon, Jesse Zabotar's book club tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Africa time. And then we've got the Sunday loop at 6 p.m., which is the same time as now tomorrow evening, where we're going to be replaying some of our earliest survivor interviews. In fact, our channel in September is 5 years old. And we've been bashed around a bit up and down and all sorts of things, but hey, we are here to stay. So when we got struck, there were some shows that weren't reposted onto this channel as well. So we will be reposting them tomorrow on the Sunday loop. So stay tuned for that. That is an interview with Lisa Meister and Cindy. And I know Lisa Meister has actually gone on to do amazing things as well since then, Cindy as well. So let's join me for hearing their original interviews as well. So yes, everything is, other than that, we are all up to date, and I hope you're all having a fantastic weekend. And without any further ado, ta-da, Dr. Jerry Marzinsky. You see, you are a doctor. I can't not call you doctor. I don't often call people that. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I got tired of correcting people when they called me doctor, and I just went, okay, it's an honorary title. They're giving it to me. If the establishment doesn't like it, they can go talk to all these people because I've been doing it for years, and I'll just live with it.
Well, you're definitely a doctor. I mean, an honorary doctor. But I'm wondering always, when we hear about how these doctors are trained and what they many times ingrained to do, I'm not sure if that's a good thing. So we shall give you our own title, but we'll figure that out as we go along, right? But most definitely, much more knowledgeable, in my opinion, than lots and lots and lots of people with that title. So, Jerry, really good to see you again. And we're going to be chatting about some of your more supernatural experiences, right?
Yeah,
This
I was
evening.
kind of wondering what to do for today. I had several ideas, and then this one just popped into mind. It's like some of the very strange kind of out of time, out of space occurrences that happened to me on this path while I was working on trying to figure out what the psychotic voices were that schizophrenics were hearing. So here's like this other undercurrent, like this spiritual undercurrent that's also flowing at the same time that I'm struggling with trying to figure out what's going on with schizophrenics and what these voices are that they were hearing. Okay. So it started back when I was in the master's program. Okay, I went through 4 years of psychology at Temple University, spiritually dry, completely spiritually dry. And then another 2 years in a master's counseling program at the University of Georgia. Again, spiritually dry. So almost like I had to be reading some other kind of spiritual books on the side beside all the books from college to keep my soul fed, It felt like I was being parched in a desert. There was nothing spiritual about anything that they were teaching in the establishments colleges. So, I'd be reading different stuff, different spiritual stuff, and then I'd bring out some of it to the professors. They didn't like it. It was like, oh, you're looking into oddball stuff. So I could feel they didn't want to talk about it. Uh, they didn't want it brought up. They didn't want to answer questions about it. They didn't know about a lot of these things. One of which at that time was Carlos Castaneda. You know, um, so that just spiritually dry stuff. And so when I graduated from the master's program, I was thinking, I'm not finding what I'm looking for. So I was looking like, how does my mind work? What's going on with me? Um, what's going on with mentally ill people? What's happening? What does psychology know that's going to help me understand what and who people are? And I was disappointed, very disappointed. And there was one day I was still working at the big state hospital, the big psychiatric hospital. And a friend of mine and I decided we're going to ride our motorcycles off to the coast and go to Savannah, Georgia, which is a coastal town in the southern South. Beautiful, big trees, tropical uh, flora. And we were camping on this state site right at the edge of a huge swamp. And so this swamp went for hundreds of miles. I mean, it was the Savannah grasslands. And we'd set up camp. And here I was thinking about this. I mean, why was there no spiritual anything with regard to formal education? And then, they talked about feelings, but they more talked about reflecting feelings back to people. Okay, you feel this way, you feel that way, to make them feel that they were understood. But there was no in-depth anything about feelings or spirit. So we woke up one morning and Rick said, "Oh, I'm going to go to a sporting goods store uh, in the city of Savannah." And I said, "Well, I have no interest in that." And I said, "I'm going to stay here." So he left, and I started wondering what would happen if I just started following my feelings that day and not let rationality or any kind of thought or anything else interfere with those feelings. Okay? So I swore to myself, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to follow my feelings today. Now, this is the first time in my lifetime I ever did this, because I didn't trust them. I'm like, what's going to happen if I do that? I was curious, like, what would happen if I did that? What if I just went where my feelings led me? So here I was camped out on the edge of this huge swamp, full of alligators, water moccasins, um, and a forest on the edge. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to go where my feelings take me. Inside of 10 minutes, I was on private property. I'd crawled under a barbed wire fence that was posted saying no trespassing. Right? I'm heading into the woods along this swamp, and here's my mind kicks up. I hear these RVs coming, and here's this chatter in my mind: get out of here! These people are bootleggers. They don't want people messing around with their stills in the swamp. They'll shoot you. They don't want any interference with their illegal uh, alcohol production. And here's this voice in my head: turn back, go, disappear, get out of here, you're going to get shot. And I'm like, shut up, you got no business here today. So I just hid myself and waited till these guys on the um, quads went by. And then I started following my feelings into the swamp again. And it just kept going and going and going. I'm going deeper and deeper into the swamp. I didn't have a compass. I didn't know where I was. you know I think I might have had some water with me. I'm just going deeper and deeper, and here's this voice in my head said, where are you going? I said, well, I don't know where I'm going. What do you mean you don't know where you're going? I don't know where I'm going. Shut up. Get out of here. I just kept walking deeper and deeper along the side of this swamp. Okay, so I was in the woods part of it on the right side, and the actual swamp began on the left side, and I'm walking along the bank of the swamp, going deeper and deeper in. And yeah, after about an hour, this big giant snake, this big black snake, jumps out of the swamp right at my feet and just crosses like 2 or 3 feet from my toes. And I'm like, whoa. And I jump back and I'm watching this thing disappear off into the forest. And here's this voice in my head: you're going to get bit by a water moccasin. Nobody knows where you're here. You're going to die out here. You're never going to come back. You know, what are you doing? You're insane. Nobody knows where you're at. Turn around and go back. And I'm like, shut up. Get out of here. Just shut up. So I kept walking further and further into the swamp. So it was like maybe 2.5, 3 hours in, and I'm like, I don't know where I am. It's late afternoon. I got no compass. I'm not sure how to get back, other than kind of turn around and follow the coast again. And here's this voice jump in my head. You don't know where you're going. It's getting late in the afternoon. It's going to be dark in an hour. What are you doing? Shut up. Get out of here. So I kept going, going, going. And maybe another half hour later, I saw this strange little island out in the swamp, about 10 feet out into the swamp. And in between me and the island was all this muck and goo and plants and swamp and water. And it's just this round white sand island out there, maybe 10 feet in diameter. And it just didn't fit. Everything else was dark and mucky and dirty, and there wasn't any white sand anywhere. And I'm standing there looking at this thing, and I'm like, what's a little white sand island doing out there in the middle of the swamp? And here's this feeling. It wasn't in words. It was just this feeling: go out there. How am I going to get out there? It's 10 feet out. I don't know how deep this swamp is there. I don't know if it's quicksand. I don't know anything. I'm not going to walk out there. And I'm thinking about it. And then finally I go, this is crazy. This is crazy. And I turned around and started heading back. And I was maybe 20 feet away when that feeling kind of kicked up again and went, if you don't go out there, you're never going to know. So I walked back to the island. I'm looking at it, and I could see everything on the island from the bank. I said, what do I need to go out there for? I can see everything. There's nothing there. Why do I need to go out there? There's nothing. I could see the sand. There wasn't anything. There wasn't anything to go out there for. This thing kept tugging at me, and I'm like, damn, and I'm going, this is insane, but I'm going to do it. So I started grabbing logs and sticks and whatever I could find to build like a rough bridge to get out to the island. So finally, after maybe 20 minutes or a half hour, I got enough dead sticks and logs and stuff to get out there. I go out and I jump onto the island, and I'm looking around, and there's nothing there. And I look at my feet, and here's these little black sand crabs that I've seen hundreds of times before. When you run into them, they just scatter in all directions. They just go all over the place. All these guys were walking from right to left. They weren't in a straight line, but they were all going from right to left in a straight line. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, that's odd. I've never seen that before. And all of a sudden my attention fixates on one of them. Okay? And I'm watching that one, and he walks over a pebble. And I look at the pebble, and then I look around the island, and it's the only pebble on that island. And I'm like, okay, that's odd. So I bend over to pick it up, and it won't come out. It's not acting like a pebble. So I stick my finger under it and then grab onto it, and I yank on it, and out of the ground, almost like it's materializing out of that sand, is this beautiful 6-inch Indian spear point, about this big. Looked like it was made yesterday. It was shiny, like it was coated with lacquer. It was sharp as a razor blade. The point was just perfectly sharp, and I'm like, holy cow! What a find! I'm like, okay, that substantiates it. It's like that's what that was all about. And we would hunt Indian spear points in Georgia. It was like they were like special objects, but this was the best one I've ever found. Pulled that out of the ground, and I started heading back. I said, "Okay, that's an affirmation." I could feel it. That was a strong affirmation. Okay, you listen to your feelings, and they led you to this beautiful. You know, I got it hanging above my head here. I can't take the camera down to show it, but I'd never get it back in place again. But it's over my head right now. But it didn't end there. That I brought it back, and Rick was back at the campsite. I was covered with dirt and from the swamp, and I showed it to him, and he was amazed too. Right. So it didn't end there though. I liked that thing so much. It had a special feel
Wow.
to me that I started
Wow.
wearing
That
it
is.
around my neck when I went to work. Okay. Now at that time I was working at this big giant psychiatric hospital. Okay. There were like 10,000 patients there. That thing would have been considered a weapon. Okay. If they saw it on me, if they ever saw it under my shirt. But what was annoying about it is it had a very sharp tip on it, and every time I bent over, it would poke me in the belly, and that was annoying. So it was December, and I'd stopped wearing it for a while because it kept poking me in the belly. But it was a very cold December. It was a December 23rd. I was getting ready for work, and I had a tight sweater. I said, "Well, I'm going to wear this to work again today," and it felt like it was protecting me. And I put it between the shirt and the sweater, and it was a very tight sweater. Okay. Um, well, before that, I had a dream, and that dream was on December 23rd, that spear point had fallen off my neck and shattered onto a tile floor that looked very much like one of the tile floors in one of the psychiatric units I was working at the prison at the hospital. And, um, so I figured, well, okay, given the circumstances under which I found this thing, I better do something. Yeah. So what I did is I found the strongest string I could was a nylon guitar string, a thick nylon guitar string, and I wrapped it around the top of that spear point like a bunch of times, and then as hard as I could pulled it, and then got a tube of super glue and put the super glue on top of the windings so it would not come off. It would not come off. Right? And then I melted the two ends of the string together so they were fused together. So it was like one strong nylon guitar string. Tested it out, and then that morning I put it on my neck and put it outside of my shirt, and then put on a tight sweater, thinking that if it did break, the sweater was so tight it would catch it, and it would catch on the sweater before it hit the floor. Right. So I tested it out. It was okay. I went to work, and then sometime that morning, I'm walking down the one of the hallways in the psychiatric rehabilitation unit, and that thing snapped. It snapped right where it was welded together. It fell right between the shirt and my sweater, and it hit a tile floor that looked exactly like the one in the dream, right at my feet. It didn't break in
Wow.
half like at
Wow.
the dream said, but the tip, the very sharp tip, shattered into a million pieces. So it no longer had that little fine chip. And it was like somebody hit me in the head with a baseball bat. It was like, okay, I had the intuition that something like this was going to happen. I did everything I could to prevent it, and it happened anyway on a tile floor that looked exactly like the one in the dream. And it was like outer limits time. It was like do 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 do. And I stooped down and I'm just staring at this thing in disbelief. Right in the middle of this hallway of the psychiatric unit, where that thing would have been considered a weapon had anybody on the staff seen it. And I'm just staring at it in disbelief, squatted down. And then I hear a nurse call, "Are you okay?" And I grab the thing up and stick it in my pocket. And I said, "Yeah, everything's fine." So it was like something strange had happened. I couldn't account for it, but it was like
Wow.
these intrusions from another reality. Okay. Um,
Right.
then
That's fascinating, actually.
yeah, it stuck with me, you know. But there was about that time there were all these little blips of things happening that didn't make sense, and I found myself just kind of shrugging them off. It was like, well, I don't know what that means, and I just shrug them off and I'd forget about them, you know. And then I found that if I didn't write them down, I would forget about them, and that was for some reason that disturbed me. Okay. Um, Now I'm not sure why, but it did. So I started writing down weird things that started happening. Now, somewhere in there, this incident happened, and it was also startling. I was on the bottom floor of this big psychiatric unit, and here was a maintenance man with a grinder cutting the cap off of the bottom of this banister. It was a pipe banister. I don't know if I told you this story before. Have I told you this one?
No.
I don't think so. So it was like this pipe banister that went up to the second floor of this big psychiatric unit. Okay, so it was made
Oh,
out
the
of a
meds actually did. The
round,
pills. But carry on.
yeah, it was a
Sorry,
round
carry
pipe,
on. Yes.
a round pipe. And here's this maintenance man cutting the bottom cap off it. And it was the most exciting thing going on the first floor. Here were all these patients standing around watching the sparks fly and the smoke, and it's like a little miniature 4th of July as he had the grinder and he was cutting through the steel. So I just got in the middle of them. And I'm standing there watching it along with them. We were all enjoying the show, and I knew at the top of this banister there was no cap. I had already noticed that, because all the other banisters in the building had a cap at both ends. There was no cap at the top end of this banister. So as he finished cutting, that cap dropped to the floor, and out of that banister poured thousands of psychiatric pills. Thousand was like a multicolored waterfall coming out of that banister. And they just kept pouring out and pouring out and pouring out. It was decades worth of psychiatric medication that these patients had been dumping down that banister to get rid of it. They'd put it under their tongue so the staff didn't see it, and then they carry it to the banister and throw it down the banister. You know, so they didn't have to risk being, hiding it or throwing it in the trash or something like that. So it would have got them in trouble. It was like the magical disposal for medications. And I'm looking at this waterfall and I'm absolutely stunned. I mean, here's all these pills just bouncing all over the floor and just you know spreading out all over the floor of this unit. And I'm like, each one of those is a vote of a psychiatric patient to not get better, supposedly. So I bent down and I started looking at them a little closer, and most of them were antipsychotic medications. You know, and I'm like, what would motivate schizophrenic patients to throw away the medications? The only thing that they had that would keep them in normal reality. Why were they choosing to go crazy? Why were they throwing their meds away? And why were they choosing to become violent again? To hear voices again? To then go psychotic again? I had no idea at that time, but they were, and they continued to do that. They continued to throw their medications away. They continued to put them under their tongues and spit them down the toilet, or hide it. And I was like, why were they doing that? You know, so that was another kind of weirdo marker along the way. And I found out later, but at that time I had no idea. But it stood out. It just stood out like a sore thumb. And about that time, the works of Carlos Castaneda had hit, the psychiatry, psychology, counseling part of the hospital. This was a massive hospital. There were um, 200 buildings on the grounds of this place. It was like a small city of crazy people, mentally ill. It's like a sea of mentally ill people. And the Carlos Castaneda stuff had hit. Well, you might not know who he is, but he was an anthropologist who kind of fell in with a shaman, or what they called a sorcerer in Mexico, here in Mexico. Um, As a matter of fact, 60 miles from the border. And apparently they wrote about coming up to Tucson and some of the places I visited in northern Mexico. But this shaman or sorcerer took this anthropologist under his wing and was teaching him about a totally different reality that was ancient. Okay. And it was fascinating. Uh, and, but there wasn't any way to really prove a lot of what he said, because nobody had ever met this shaman, this sorcerer. But Carlos wrote a series of books on what he learned. Okay, and one of the things that this sorcerer said that grabbed me, and I was already kind of struggling with, was that if you get a intrusion from another level of reality, that you will just write it off and or ignore it, or just you know somehow make it normal, to make it fit in with your normal idea of reality. And one of the things that Castaneda could do with the shaman was to actually materialize in places hundreds of miles away. So they want to go to this city, uh, 200 miles away. This sorcerer could make that happen, and they would just appear in the crowd. So they'd be in a park with all these people around them. And then one day they did this, and Castaneda and Don Juan appeared in this park. And Don Juan turns to Carlos and he said, "Look around you. Look around you. Watch what's happening around you." They had just appeared out of nowhere in this park. There were people all around, and Carlos is looking around. He goes, you know, "What am I supposed to be looking for?" There was just people walking around like in a normal park. You know, what Don Juan eventually told him is, "We appeared out of nowhere. We just appeared out of nowhere to these people, and not a single one of them noticed. They just went like it was
Wow.
there." And they showed some of these things on YouTube where people appear out of nowhere, and people don't even notice it because it doesn't make sense.
Right.
you know so it's like, well, they must have been there, or they must have been behind something, or I just didn't see them. So here's all these excuses coming out, like,
The dark.
to
Exactly.
so I saw that and I'm like, I have to know the truth of this. you know I have to know, because there was already strange things happening in my life that I saw that I was blotting out because they didn't fit. So there was really no way to check a lot of the stuff that Don Juan was saying to Carlos, other than how it felt. And this felt right, and it felt like I've got to I've got to figure out a way to test this thing. If something materializes in front of people and they see it clearly, what would they do? What would they do? Would they do what Carlos said they'd do? Just ignore it? You know, I had to know that because I was starting to see strange stuff happening that didn't belong in normal reality. They were just glimpses every once in a while, just like little blips. And it was like, if I didn't write them down, I would completely forget about them. Right. So here I am torturing myself for probably 2 months, thinking, how can I create something that would appear supernatural, where the people could clearly see it, where I wouldn't have to be an active part of it, so I could watch what happened without getting myself thrown in jail. Okay. So I came up
Wow.
with idea after idea after idea this for 2 months, and every single one would either get me fired or would get me thrown in jail. You, you can't just disturb normal reality without, if it doesn't work out,
Right, exactly.
you're in trouble. All right. So one day it dawned on me, I had this Halloween costume that I used, to go to Halloween parties, and basically that's all I used it for. What it was a kind of like a pieced together German Nazi uniform. Okay. So I had a World War One German helmet. I went and I bought a MP40 replica Schmeitzer machine gun. So it looked like a real one, but it wasn't a real machine gun. But you couldn't tell the difference, except the barrel had a clog in it, you know. And I had a friend who was a war aficionado who uh, had constructed on his own. He sewed together a German SS uniform, a tunic, okay, that had all the badges and stuff on it. And I had a string of machine gun bullets, and I had uh, green army pants, and I had a pair of riding boots that looked like Nazi jack boots somewhat, okay, and a armed swastika with a red swastika. And I go, okay, that that coming weekend, Rick and I had a date with two social work interns, and we were going to go out to his place on the lake, which was like maybe a 8 or 10 mile dirt road drive to get there in the middle of nowhere. Okay. So I'm like, okay. And I went and I had one patient that I had graduated. It was my patient when he was in the state hospital, and we had graduated him successfully with a cosmetology license. And he started his own beauty shop in town near the hospital. So I used to go visit him periodically. He gave me free haircuts. He was a he was an ex-convict, always acting tough, but it was like, he wasn't really, but he could put on the act. And what he had done is he got in trouble with the law again, and he convinced them that he was crazy and to send him to the mental hospital instead of back to prison. Right? So he ended up on the psychiatric unit where I was working. I sent him over to the rehab center because he had enough sense to benefit from a job training. Okay. So we trained him up, turned him loose with a cosmetology certificate, and I would go visit him every once in a while. But then one day when I was, after this idea came up, I went and visited him and I said, hey, James, I need your help this weekend. You're the only one I know who's crazy enough to do this thing. Okay. And I told him what I needed to know. And I said, this is what I'd like you to do. And I knew he would do it because he wasn't clinically crazy, but he was crazy, crazy. He's like stupid crazy. And I said, I want to test out this theory and I need your help because you're the only one I know that's crazy enough to do this. I said, Rick and I have dates with these two social work interns. I'll be driving them to the lake to Rick's house this weekend. What I want to do is get with you, and I'd like you to put on this German uniform, while I'm driving out there at night. And I want you to walk in front of the car. I'm going to get out of the car. And so I laid out this plan to him. I said, what do we do? Well, let's go out and look for a place where you can hide next to this road, where we can hide your car. And we're going to put you in this full dress German uniform with the machine gun, the Nazi swastika, the German helmet, everything, the jack boots. And what I want you to do is walk out. We found this big bush where he could hide behind. So what I was going to do was stop in front of that bush, put the high beam headlights on, and tell the girls I saw something out there. I need to go check it out. Okay. So I'd stop the car, take the keys, and I'd disappear into the brush on the left and then run as fast as I could back to the car. So I was back there. And then James was supposed to come out right into the high headlight beams of the car and slowly walk across the headlight beams dressed in this full German uniform with the machine gun bullets, the German, the swastika. And I told him, don't look at the car. Don't turn toward the car. Don't make any movement toward the car. My objective is not to scare these girls, but to see what they do after they see you and you disappear. Okay. So it worked like clockwork. All right. He hid his car at 8 o'clock at night. We were driving down the dirt road. Told the girls, I see something out there. Hold on. Let me go check this out. I stopped the car, put the headlights on right in front of this bush, took the keys so they couldn't drive away without me, and disappeared off to the left. I walked in front of the car and then off to the left into the dark bushes and then ran back to the car. And I look back and here's James, just like clockwork. He walks out with his full German uniform, the machine gun, the bullets, the Nazi uniform, the swastika, all of it in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. Okay, in the middle of this big forested no place. There's nothing there in the middle, and he finishes his slow walk, and just as he finishes his walk, I'm back at the car door. Okay, so I get in and I go, well, I guess I didn't see anything, and they asked me, well, what do you think you saw? And I said, well, I thought I saw a tank. That doesn't make any sense. So I didn't say anything else, and they didn't either. I started the car, I drove off. They kept totally silent for about 5 minutes. They didn't say anything. They just sat there dead silent, you know. And I'm just driving off like nothing happened. And then one of them says, we saw a soldier. And I'm like, a soldier. Notice the first degradation. It was no longer a Nazi soldier. It wasn't a German soldier. It wasn't an SS trooper, even though there was all the regalia on, the German helmet, the Nazi swastika, the German machine gun. It wasn't a Nazi soldier. It was a soldier, which made more sense than a Nazi soldier, but it still didn't make a lot of sense. You know, what would a soldier be
Right.
doing walking around in the night with a gun and a helmet in the middle of nowhere when there's no fort within 100 miles of that place, you know? So that did
Right.
seeing a soldier made more sense than seeing a Nazi soldier, but it still didn't make any sense. And so they told me that, and I
Exactly.
said, "Oh, you guys are just razzing me because I thought I saw a tank, and now you just made that up, you know." And they didn't say anything else, you know. And so we get there, and Rick has got he's got the steaks cooking and that kind of stuff, and it's like they don't say another word. So I figured I better bring it up, and I said, Rick, it's been a strange night getting here. I said I thought I saw something out in the you know out in the forest there. I stopped, I looked, I didn't see anything. I got back in. These guys said they saw a soldier while I was gone. And I said, is there any forts around here? Is there any training ground? Is there any reason a soldier would be walking out in the middle of nowhere without a light at night? In the, you know, he goes, you know, uh, you go, no soldier. And there was no reason for a soldier to be there. And then it was like a couple of weeks later. I asked the girls. I said, well, remember that night at James's house? You know, you guys saw a soldier, or you saw something out there. I don't think I said soldier. You saw something out there when I was gone. What was it you saw? They said, well, we saw a hunter. So it went from Nazi soldier to hunter. Okay. And there was no reason for a hunter to
Wow.
be out there either because, I was asking Rick, I mean, the four of us were together. And I said, Rick, is it hunting season? And he goes, no, it's not hunting season. There's no reason for somebody to be walking around with a gun out there at all. Right? So here's the degradation from a Nazi soldier to a hunter. And then months later, when I was driving the girls back, one of them was finished their internship and driving them back to the airport. And I brought that up again. And what they had done is they had forgotten about it until I mentioned it. That they had seen a hunter.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So here it was right before my eyes. So I saw it with my own eyes, exactly what Castaneda was talking about. So from then on, I
Right.
started writing down every weird thing that happened. Um, and the weird things kept happening with following. So Castaneda had a system uh, where there's things you had to do. And, I was following some of that. And there was one day where, one of the things you had to do was walk around in the woods at night, in the middle of the woods at night. And there's reasons people don't go into the woods at night. So
I'd say.
here I am. I'm walking around in the woods at night, no flashlight, and there's a certain step you had to do to keep from tripping. And then all of a sudden, here's this orange spark appears in front of my face. It's like it looked like a spark that flies off a fire. Okay. When you start a fire and a big orange spark flies up. Well, this ignited right in front of my eyes and then moved at a 45-degree angle down into the ground. And I'm standing there watching it as it disappears into the forest floor. And I'm like, what was that? So here was another intrusion. You know, and
Wow.
I'm like, that freaked me out. So I got out of the woods and I'm like, wrote it down in my notes. So it was like, it made no sense. I mean, and I clearly saw it. Right? And then a few weeks later, I was dating a optometrist intern from the out at the hospital, and she didn't understand any of this kind of stuff. You know, she didn't know who Castaneda was. She didn't understand any of this, and she kind of wanted to. And I had this feeling that if I took her out to there was this in the middle of this big farmer's field, there was this round stand of trees, and through the middle of it, and this was out in the middle of nowhere too. Through the middle of it flowed this stream. Okay, and I had this gut level feel that if I took her out there that night after sunset, that something would happen that would kind of show her what a glimpse of this other stuff that I was kind of on the fringes of would look like. So here we are sitting in this dark woods, just listening inside of the row of trees, looking around, nothing was happening. So after about 15 minutes, here was this cracking started at the top of the trees. It was like branches were breaking. It was like crack, 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 crack. And it was moving around the tree circle to where we were. And it's just crack, crack, crack. And we're looking at each other and like, what the hell is that? And then in the leaves, right near us, you hear this stream of water moving right in our direction, you know, and Kathy jumps up and screams, "Don't piss on me." Just like that. And then it stops just like that. And I get up and I look at her and she looks at me and we ran out of there. We left there. So here was another intrusion from this strange reality. And it was like, okay, I'm not sure where this is going. You know, um, I'm not prepared for this. I'm going to stop. Um, I'm going to stop doing this stuff. You know, so at that point, you know, I had what I needed. Weird stuff happens. If you don't note it, you will blot it out of your regular reality. You'll make it disappear because it just doesn't fit. You know, and anything that doesn't fit, just it grates on you. You know, it's like this. What just happened? It doesn't fit. You can't predict it. You don't know what it is. You don't know where it came from. You don't know anything about it. It's just like an intrusion into your reality from another reality. Okay, so these things were these blurts were like coming in there. Okay, and then I think I might have told you this this one too. It's I call it the trip to the bottom of the lake. Did I tell you that story?
Tell it again.
Okay, I'll tell it again. Okay, so here I was asking psychiatric patients, what are the voices? You know, what are they telling you? What do they do? How do they react? What do they say? You know, and they didn't want to. They didn't want to talk about the voices. And I didn't know at the time that the voices didn't want them talking about them either. Matter of fact, one of them told me that the voices told him he knows too much. Don't tell him anything else. You know, and I went, that's a hallucination that said that. You know, so it was another kind of intrusion from this other world. The voices saying, "Hey, he knows too much already. Shut up." You know, what was that? You know, so I'm like, I got in trouble at the state hospital for asking patients questions about what the voices were. Psychiatrist told me to ordered me to stop, or there would be repercussions. He told me that the voices were hallucinations, and that if I didn't stop asking about them, that I was only making the patients worse by reinforcing their hallucinations. And he threatened me. Said, "You keep doing this, you know, I'm going to bring you know, I'm going to you're going to be in trouble." So I had to really be careful about asking about the voices at the state hospital. Um, so after realizing that these things were not hallucinations, I'm like, okay, if they're not hallucinations, then what are they? And I prayed. I said, Lord, let me experience what these things are. You know, let me see for myself what they are. And nothing happened. Nothing happened for a week. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. You know, so going on the third week, I'm I'm heading out swimming. I go swimming after working at the state hospital all day. It was like relaxation, and you know, the floor of the lake that I lived on was rock. As far out as I could walk, it was rock. So I thought the whole bottom of the lake was rock. You know, I never walked out far enough to get into the mud, and you know, I started swimming, and I was a good swimmer. I was a strong swimmer, and I was at home in the water. And this night, the water was just silky smooth. There was no waves. It was like glass. Okay? I headed out into the lake, and I hit my stride. So I wasn't burning up any more oxygen than I needed, but I was cutting through the water pretty quickly. And it was almost like a meditation. And after a while, I started getting tired, and it was getting late. And I go, okay, where am I? And I stop and I look around, and I'm way far out into the lake, and the sun is on its way down. And you know, I'm looking around, and suddenly I hear this voice in my head saying, "Well, you're too tired to make it back to the shore," which was true. You know, I was too tired to make it back to the shore in the condition I was in, but I wasn't worried about it because I'd already had a year of skin and scuba diving at the university, a very extensive course, and one of those facets of that course was, you know, how to stay alive on the water forever, which was like the dead man's float. You know, so I wasn't worried about it at all. It had never crossed my mind. And here's this voice comes into my head again. It says, you know, what was the second thing? You're too far from land to make it in, and the sun is going down, it's starting to get dark, you know, and um, in a little while, the lights on the cabins on the shore in the distance are going to start going out. You won't be able to see the shoreline. Okay, and I wasn't worried about any of that stuff. So basically, what hit me at that point was this is a yes set. This is a psychological yes set that just flew through my mind. It's like, a vacuum salesman comes into your house and goes, "Oh, I got this beautiful machine. Doesn't it look great?" "Yeah, it looks great." "Well, look how quiet it is." I turned it on. "Oh yeah, it's quiet. It's quiet, right?" "Yeah, it's quiet." "Well, look how well it cleans your floor." "Oh yeah, wouldn't you like something like that cleans your floor?" "Yeah, oh yeah, sure I would." So it's this yes set. Well, you really want to buy it, don't you? You know. So it's a kind of like you got that yes thing running, and then they go, "Oh yeah, yeah, I want to buy it." After you get that yes set running. So here was this yes set hitting me in the middle of this lake as the sun's going down, with a set of truisms that I knew were true, but the ending on it, after it said the last thing, the lights are going to start going out in the lake. It's like, you're too tired to get back. Okay, and that was true. Right? So I started into what they call it the dead man's float. You put your hands behind your back, you lean over, and you're just floating with your head, your face in the water. Your legs are dangling down in the water. Your hands are behind your back, and you're not breathing. Your face is underwater. When you need a breath, you pull your head back up, you blow the air out of your lungs as fast as you can, and you start sinking immediately. And then before your face goes underwater, you fill your lungs again. And then even after you do that, you got the momentum of going down. You keep sinking down for maybe 3 or 4 feet, and then you pop back up again, and then you're floating on the surface again. Right. So you're breathing once every half minute or 20 seconds, like that, something like that. You don't have to expend any energy whatsoever. So I'm resting up in the lake doing that, and when I come up for a breath, here this thing comes up again, same voice. You're too tired to make it back to the shore. Yeah, okay. Wasn't worried about it in the least. Uh, it's getting dark. You're going to get disorientated. You're not going to be able to find your way back to the shore. I don't think so. You know, the lights are going to be going out pretty soon. You won't be able to see the shore. And then it adds all those things. All those three things are true. And then it adds, and you're going to drown. I'm like, I'm going, what? Doesn't say anything else. I'm like, that wasn't even on my mind. It wasn't even a thought about drowning. It didn't cross my mind at any level. I wasn't worried about it. So I go back into the dead man's float and come back up, and here it comes again. As soon as I broke the surface, you know, you're too tired to make it back to the shore. You know, um, it's getting dark. It was getting dark, and and you were headed for the bottom. You're going to drown. I'm like, I'm going to drown. Not going to drown. So I do it again, and here comes this thing again. So this time I let air out instead of, bobbing to the surface while I'm sinking. I let air out. I started sinking more. Okay. So I'm like I'm spiting this thing now. Like, screw you. I'm going to drown, am I? So I started sinking, and then I hit what they call the crush depth, where the water pressure crushes your lungs so far that you're no longer buoyant, and you start sinking like a rock. Right? So I knew what that was, but the rate at which I was sinking was a little spooky. And I was spooked by this whole thing. What the hell is this thing telling me I'm going to drown?
Wow.
It's not me, because I didn't believe I was going to drown. So if it's not me, who or what is it? So I come back up, and here it goes again. It's getting dark. You know, you're too tired to make it back to the shore. The lights are going out on the shoreline, and you're panicking, you know, because I came up real quick, and then it goes, and you're going to drown. And I'm like, no, no, I'm not going to drown. So go back down again, hit the crush depth, start sinking really fast. Okay. And I already knew what that was. And then all of a sudden I'm down, I don't know, 20, 25 feet, and I feel this freezing cold something coming up my leg. Okay. And I shot for the surface right away. Even before I got to the surface, I knew what it was. It was a thermocline. It was a layer of cold water that's heavier than the warm water and usually sits at the bottom of the lake or the ocean because it's heavier. Okay? And I knew that's what I felt. I came up, and here's this thing again. The lights are going out. It's getting late, and you're panicking. You know, I'm not panicking. And and it was true. The lights were going out. So I go down again. Let the air out, sink back down, go through the thermocline. So it's this probably 6-foot layer of cold water, and I could just feel it coming all the way up my body, just freezing cold. But on the bottom of it, it was warm. So it had not hit the bottom yet. So below this layer of freezing water was warm water. Okay? And then I'm sinking, sinking, sinking. I have to keep equalizing the pressure in my ears. And then boom, I feel this slimy something kind of grabbed onto my feet and shot for the surface again. You know, even before I got there, I knew what that was. I had hit the bottom of the lake. It wasn't rock like I thought. It was muck. It was ooze. You know, so I come up again, and this thing this time says, "Okay, it's dark. You're having trouble seeing the shore, and there's a motorboat coming right at you." Okay? And I didn't hear it. I mean, underwater, you can usually hear something a long ways away. Water sound travels in water a lot better than it does in the air. Okay? Um, and I look around, and sure enough, here's this motorboat in the distance with a green and white light on, and it's coming in my direction. And this voice in my head is saying, "They can't see you. They're going to hit you, and that propeller is going to cut you into a million pieces." And I'm going, well, if I need to, I'll dive below it. I've had to do that before when I was scuba diving. Had to go hug the bottom until a ship passed over in shallow water. And I can do it again if I need to. I'm not going to do it unless I have to. And here's this thing telling me they can't see you. That thing's heading right for you. And it was, you know. And so I'm kind of watching it, and it comes by maybe 25 feet away, and I watch as it passes. And I'm paying attention to the boat, and I wasn't paying attention to the wake. So I turn my head, and just as I'm taking in a breath of air, the wake from the wave comes over my head, and I take in a mouthful of water because I wasn't expecting it. I started coughing it, spitting it up. And here's this thing again. See, you're going to drown. You're panicking. You're going to drown. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Screw you. You know, so kind of spit that out, go down again, drop past the crush depth through the thermocline. My feet are stuck in the mud. I'm at the bottom of the lake. I don't know, 25, probably 35 feet down, maybe 40 feet down. And I'm just stuck in the mud, and I'm floating above the bottom of the lake like a dead man, like I am dead. My knuckles are like a foot from the mud. My feet are stuck in the mud. There was no feeling because the water was bathwater warm, so I couldn't feel any feeling on my skin. I wasn't breathing, so there was no movement. I was scared, so there wasn't any thought. I was waiting for something to come out of the dark because it was dark down there. There was no light. The sun had already gone down, and I'm at the bottom of this lake, you know, after dark, stuck in the mud like a dead guy, you know, and just floating there. And it was a monumental experience because all there was that I was aware that I was aware. There was no feeling, there was no thought, there was no sight, there was no talk there. Everything was shut down, you know, except my consciousness, my awareness, you know. And I stayed down there as long as I could, maybe 20 seconds more, but it was one of the most unique experiences that I'd ever have, because that's what was there past all the senses, is just a pure sense of
Exactly.
awareness. So once you turn off all this,
And yeah, quietness of the mind.
yep,
I
it's
think
and
that's what.
it wasn't even mind.
Sorry,
It was
Jerry,
just
carry on.
pure awareness.
A
There was
being,
no
being.
noise. There was just being. It was just being. Yeah. So that's what's
Yeah.
there. You know.
What's interesting, Jerry, you speak like that, and I've actually heard stories of guys that are on death row, um, that would go through a similar experience. It's like the mind is so tortured and so traumatized by death coming. But when they break through that fear, they just move into that being. I've heard numerous stories of guys on death row that by the time they've had their being executed, they are completely at peace. They've made their peace with their creator. They've come to terms with whatever it is they've needed to come to terms with. And it's like they've left the earth understanding and being, which is, I find, very, very interesting as well. It's that breakthrough of the human psyche, that fear, because we at all cost want to hold on to life more than anything, right? That's a human condition. We want to hold on to life at all cost. So when we break through that, and I'm sure that's why when we're looking at the satanic ritual abuse as well, and a lot of our survivors that have been through this intense abuse, they actually make them die. And the kids actually, during some of this training, they literally die, but then they bring them back to life again. It's like they want them to get beyond that fear of death. So they do that. So you're going to die, but you can come back again, right? Which is very interesting. That's part of the mind control torture. Very, very interesting that as well. But then you can see there how they use it for their nefarious purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was another one. I don't know where this fit in, but it was I've been out of the body once, and this was during the Castaneda stuff. Okay, and I was on a dirt road outside of the cabin I was living in on the lake, and I was moving into the woods like I normally did while I was practicing Castaneda stuff, you know, and the woods were full of tangles and barbs and stickers and all that kind of stuff. And I remember it was clear as day. Everything was brighter, everything was sharper. And I'm floating over the ground, heading toward the woods. And I enter the woods, and I'm not getting caught on anything. I'm going through the stickers, I'm going through the briars, I'm going through the trees, and I'm just flying through the woods, without a body. So, and then boom, I woke up back in the cabin again. But it was so different from a normal dream. I mean, I could see all the same things. The moon was full, and that next night I went out there to where I had this experience, and I looked at the woods and I looked at the moon, and it was the same as what I saw when I was out of the body. Oh, I lost your sound. I can't hear you.
Sorry, no, I just put
Oh, there
myself
you
on
go.
mute there for a bit. Would that would be like lucid dreaming though, what you're describing is more like lucid dreaming,
No, I had a
where you
lucid
actually
dream.
leave the body.
No,
Yeah.
I was out of the body. The lucid dream I had one of those too, all during this same kind of experience where I dreamed that I was on the back porch and it was summertime, and the lake was there and the pine trees were there, but there was snow on the ground. I'm like, well, that can't be. It's July or something like that. So here's this thought in my head. Well, scoop it up and rub it on your face, and if it's cold and wakes you up, then it's real. If it doesn't wake you up, then it's a dream. So I scoop up the stuff and it was like ivory snowflakes. Put it on my face and it was like dry and it just fell off. And I thought, well, if I'm dreaming, I can fly. And I took off and I'm flying around in all these trees, having a great old time, flying around and then landed. That was a lucid dream. This other one was, I was out of the body on that one.
All
I
right.
wasn't dreaming.
Okay.
So
Well,
then these weird episodes kept intruding and they were getting more and more intense. Okay. So there was one period of time, this is when I was out of Georgia. I was already in Tucson and I was probably working at the state prison at this time in the psych department. And I was with a friend of mine, and I decided to drive to San Diego. And we were going to go see the Sai Baba convention. So he was a holy man in India that I was planning to go visit, but they were having a convention in San Diego. So we decided to drive out there. We were going to drive her car. She wanted me to drive, and I had no problem with that. So we drove all the way there. We got to the place where this place was, drove into the parking lot, and found out where we were supposed to be staying. And then in this balcony overhead, there's all these high up people in this Sai Baba organization. They were like the political elite of this organization. And Anne was all excited about this. I mean, she was into the politics of the stuff. And all of a sudden, when we get back, we see these people up in the balcony. We get in the car, and she wants to drive all of a sudden. So I said, well, okay, you can drive. So we get in, and here's this parking lot across from the parking lot we're on that is built on top of this cliff, right? So there's woods all the way around the edges. So if you drove over the edge, there was no guardrail. If you drove over the edge, you'd fall down into this big ravine. And it was like, I knew it was there. There was no reason to go in there because we were supposed to be heading back to where we were staying. She gets in the car, starts it, and then guns it. She steps on the gas pedal, and she's heading straight over this cliff. We go across the road. We're in this parking lot now that if you keep going, you're going to go over this cliff. And we're going to get hurt. The car's going to get damaged, or we're going to get killed. And I turn and look at her, and it was really strange. This very strange feeling came over me. It was like taking 6 shots of whiskey or something like that. It was just this absolutely calm feeling, and it wasn't a verbal message, but it was this knowing, this absolute knowing that everything was going to be okay. And it was like, sit back and watch the show. So it didn't make any sense because here we are heading over this cliff with her she's got the gas pedal floored, and I'm looking at her and she's just like this. She's looking straight ahead like a zombie, looking intent like she's going to drive over that cliff. And I'm just looking at her like, what in the blazes is going on with her? And then boom, we hit a tree and the car stalls out. Right as we're about to go over a cliff, we hit a tree. And I'm like looking at her, and then she kind of looks around like she doesn't realize what happened. And I asked her, I said, Anne, what happened? She turns to me and she goes, I don't know. And I'm like, that's odd. So by then, I mean, all these higher ups in the organization come running down like, what just happened? Why are you about to drive over this cliff? And start asking all these questions. And I said, I wasn't driving. I don't know what happened. So they started asking her, and she goes, well, the brakes didn't work or something like that. It was either the brakes didn't work or the gas pedal froze, something like that. But the head of the organization guy had a Porsche dealership in San Diego, and he was able to rule that out right away. Okay? It wasn't a malfunction of the car. Something had taken her over, right?
I was gonna
And
say,
something had jumped into me saying, calm down, watch the show. You know, because when something like that happens, I'm not just sitting there watching it. I'm doing stuff. You know, I'm doing stuff. I'm not going to just sit there and just no. That's not me. And that stuck in my mind. And I remembered what I did earlier. Like, don't forget this. You know, don't forget this. And they ruled out
oh,
anything wrong with the car. The next morning, I went out there and looked at the tree that the car had hit, and it had fallen over. It it stopped at a 45-degree angle when she hit it, and then it just fell over. So that's how close we were to hitting the tree and falling into that ravine. That tree was barely hanging on, and it fell over. All right.
well,
So
it would
here,
feel to me like that would have been a very restless spirit that has not crossed over, that either took its own life like that or died in a car accident. That's what those rogue spirits do.
well, what got me was my reaction. You know, my reaction wasn't anything like my reaction
Yeah.
normally is. It was like sit back and watch the show. You know, and this
Your
absolute
spirit knew
knowing
though.
while
Yeah.
we're heading over the cliff, this absolute knowing that we're going to be all right
But you're good.
when it can't
Hmm.
be. You know, everything physical that's happening around me is pointing to the opposite. We're going over that cliff and
Yeah.
we're gonna die. But there wasn't
But you're
any reaction to that. You know, it was like, okay, what's going to happen next? You know, everything's going to be okay, but how can that be? You know, the next
your
one was even
spirit knew.
what?
Yeah. I said your spirit knew that
Hmm.
quiet centered feeling spiritually you knew, and that was amazing because in that moment to me, and that's what I notice a lot, is that at these times, when someone will come to that moment of crisis, again spirit rises, your soul rises, and you get that sense of calm where you're okay, just like boom.
Well, it didn't make any sense. You know, matter of fact, despite writing down this thing, there was another incident like that that happened. So there were three of them. Okay. But the grand finale was when I was going for my commercial pilot's license in gliders. Okay. No engine. Okay. So what we were doing, we were practicing crash landings. Okay. So what you had to do was drop that plane. You had 250 feet to stop that, to land and stop that aircraft. Okay. So it required precise altitude and airspeed control. So there were two cones on the runway, two fluorescent cones, 250 feet apart. Okay? And what I was flying was the trainer. So the trainer had a steel skid on the nose. You know, so if you needed to stop it in a hurry, you could push the stick forward, and that skid would just gouge into the ground and just plow it up like a tractor. You know, and it wouldn't hurt the plane because it was on a steel skid. Right? So if you went even 1 inch over the second cone on your flight test, you would fail. So you had to land that plane and stop it in 250 feet. And I was going for my commercial pilot's license at that time. And the flight instructor I had was a ex-Marine, and he was very egotistical. And what the flight instructor would do is if a flight instructor or the FAA examiner would do is if the flight instructor recommended a student take the test and that student failed the test, then he would make fun of the instructor in front of the whole sailport, you know, because he had to drive up from Phoenix to uh, the sailport in where we were, and that was about 75 miles, you know, and he didn't want to drive up there for nothing. So he made it hard on the instructor if the student failed the test. All right. So this guy, his name was Jerry too. He kept making things harder and harder and harder. Okay. And one day we're walking out to the flight line, and he goes, we're practicing these emergency landings again, basically crash landings. And he goes, "You're flying from the back seat today." I'm like, "Why am I flying from the back seat? I'm not going to be taking the test from the back seat. Plus, I can't see anything past your fat head when you're in the front seat. You know, why am I flying from the back seat?" And I realized maybe years later why he might have done that. But his head and shoulders really obstructed my view of the runway. And here I am trying to conjure up the proper speed and altitude with a clear sight when he's not there. And now my vision is obstructed by his head and shoulders. Okay. So here we're coming around. The tow plane tows us up. We're at 400 feet or so, running the pattern. I'm on final approach. I'm carrying probably 25 feet of extra altitude like I always did, because one time I was coming in on final approach, I got caught in a downdraft, and the downdraft was smashing the plane down into the desert. And I was at a very low altitude. And the only thing you can do in a sailplane to gain speed is to push the nose down. So this downdraft is already pushing me down into the ground, and I had to push the nose down further to get out of it. So I barely escaped there without wrecking the plane. So from that time on, I always carried 25 or 30 extra feet of altitude on final approach. So we're on final approach. I'm lining up. I'm bobbing back and forth. So I'm trying to see those cones over his shoulders, and I'm lined up, and I'm where I think I should be. And he yells back. He goes, "Where are you?" And I say, "Well, I'm high." And he goes, "Let me have the plane." Okay. So when he does that, he's now pilot in command. I can't touch the controls. Right? And I'm furious. I'm like, why is he doing this? This is my landing. I need to practice it. Why is he taking control of the plane? He's not going to show me anything I don't already know. Next thing I know, he stalls the airplane, and we're like 200 feet above the ground. He stalls it. The plane is no longer flying. This is the flight instructor. Stalls the plane. The dive brakes are still full out, which I had them out for my approach. And now we're drifting off to the right, away from landing straight in, and we're going down at a 45-degree angle, and he's not touching the controls. He's just sitting there rigid. And I'm looking at him like, okay, did he have a heart attack? Did he have a stroke? What's wrong with him? What happened to this guy? How come he's not flying the plane? But he's not flying the plane, and it's illegal for me to do so. But the dive brakes are still full out. If we don't put the dive brakes in, he's not going to regain control of that plane no matter what he does. Right? So I break federal law, grab the dive brakes, and I yell up to him, "Jerry, I'm putting in the dive brakes." Put in the dive brakes, close them, and shut them. So now he has a chance to fly the plane again. I mean, he can recover if he starts flying the plane, but he didn't respond at all to what I said. And we're going down, down, down. And then shortly before we're approaching this Palo Verde tree, which is probably 25 feet above ground, 30 feet above the ground, he starts flying the plane, finally. And this was strange too, because that same feeling I had in the car came over me again. This very calm feeling, like everything's going to be okay. Again, it was like slamming down 7 shots of whiskey, just very calm feeling. And it wasn't a voice, it was just this absolute knowing that everything is going to be okay. But it couldn't be. Not only were we off course for the runway, he had just flown through the top of this Palo Verde tree, and I watched as the strut hit a branch, and that branch goes spinning by my back window. Right? So we've lost both altitude and airspeed, and we lost more airspeed by running into this tree. We cut through the tree, and now we're over the desert heading for this auxiliary runway, and we're not lined up with it. That auxiliary runway is 35 feet wide, and on the other side of it is a ditch and a mound of dirt about 4 feet high. There's no way to stop that plane on 35 feet. Right? So in front of that runway is a barbed wire fence. Okay? So we have to clear the barbed wire fence. And then who knows what's going to happen once we get on the other side, because he can't land that plane in 35 feet. So what's likely to happen is that we're going to fall in that ditch. The front of that sailplane is aluminum tubing and fiberglass. He's going to be killed. I'm probably going to be seriously injured, if not killed. The plane is going to be destroyed, and we're going to plow into that ditch and into that mound of dirt in the Palo Verde trees on the other side of that runway. Right? That's what the most likely scenario would be. So I have this absolute feeling, like I did in the car at that time, everything's going to be okay. It's not in words, it's just this absolute knowing everything's going to be okay. Sit back and watch the show. But it can't be. We flew through the tree. I watched that branch come whizzing right by my head. We're heading for this auxiliary runway. We have to clear this barbed wire fence. If we don't clear that fence, we're going to get tangled up in that barbed wire. It might cut right through that thin plexiglass windshield and then cut our heads off if we don't clear that fence. And I'm looking outside the plane, bobbing back and forth, looking at that fence. We're going to make it. No, yeah, no, maybe, yeah, no, yeah, yeah. And we're getting lower the whole time. He barely clears that barbed wire fence. And I know this guy. I flew with him in Civil Air Patrol. He was an okay pilot. He wasn't an excellent pilot. He got very nervous anytime we went around the Phoenix Control Center. So he wasn't real sure of his abilities. We clear that barbed wire fence, and immediately as we clear it, he hits full right rudder. Okay, so the plane is traveling straight this way, and then the wing is facing this way. Now the wing is facing in the direction that we're heading in. The wing is lined up with the direction we were flying in. That plane is no longer flying. The whole side of the plane is one big air brake. Okay. So what happened was the plane dropped straight down, like bam, straight down. It shouldn't have done that. What should have happened is, because the whole plane was moving this way, it should have flopped over on its wing and crushed the wing, because it still had the forward movement. Even though the whole side of the plane was acting as a brake, it still should have hit the ground and flopped over, because the whole plane was still moving in that direction. So it would have flopped over on the wing, destroyed the wing, and crushed the landing gear. The landing gear should have collapsed. It didn't do that. It fell straight down, bam, and it just stopped just like that. It should have went like this. It didn't do that. It just stopped like that, and it just stopped. And it just wavered just for a few seconds, and then it slowly fell over on its wingtip like that. Boom. Just like that. That shouldn't have happened. It made no sense that it happened. I'm sitting there stunned at this whole thing after watching it, and he starts moving finally. And he opens the canopy, and we both get out. We don't say a word to each other. And we start circling that plane, just slowly looking at it. There's not a scratch on it. The landing gear isn't collapsed. You could hear the wings oil can when it hit, because the tin on the wings, or the metal on the wings, you could just hear it like a sheet of metal, just oil canning. It hit hard. And the dirt that flew up, the dust that flew up like maybe 25, 30 feet in the air. So the people on the sailport porch started running over because they thought we'd crashed and were dead. Right? So we completely circled the whole plane. There wasn't a scratch on it. I was totally stupefied. And I turned to him and I asked him, I said, "Jerry, what happened?" Guess what his answer was? "I don't know." Just like Anne, exact same words.
Yeah.
Something else was flying that plane. He wasn't flying that plane.
Yeah. It's definitely, I mean, when we look at stuff like that, there's just things that happen that are completely unexplained. And then we realize, yeah, we are protected, whether it's God, our guardian angels, our dead father, spirit who's protecting us, whatever, there's definitely protection out there. And I agree. I believe if it's your time, it's your time. If it's not your time, it's not your time either. Yeah, Jerry, thank you.
Yeah, I believe that too.
Fascinating as always.
So,
Mm.
you know,
Sorry.
basically what Castaneda is saying is these blips in reality happen to all of us. Don't
Yeah,
let
absolutely.
them disappear.
Right.
Note them.
Exactly.
Mine kept getting
Exactly.
more and more intense. You know, until the
It's yeah. But you know, with me, even if I've got to do something, if my intuition is speaking to me and I ignore it, and I'm like busy, whatever, it'll come, and then it's like this little that just does not stop bothering,
Mhm.
and if you follow what you're meant to do, it's not an issue, then we do it. But if you're not following what you're meant to do, you're gonna get involved in all sorts of resistance and stuff like that. Super fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
follow that
Mhm.
intuition because everybody has it. I remember one time I was driving by a bookstore, and here's that. It doesn't speak in words. It's like more a feeling. Like you feel like go do this, but it's not words. It's like just a tugging. It's like
Yeah.
uh,
That
um,
prompt, little
a
inner
prompt.
prompt,
Yeah, inner
a
prompt.
little inner prompt.
So
Mm.
it's telling me
And
go
that's
go in this
mm,
bookstore, and I'm like, why? It just we're going to bookstore. Okay, so I went in the bookstore
mm,
and I said, what now? And it basically goes, you know, go to the spiritual section. So I go to the spiritual section, a huge bookstore, and here's this whole wall full of uh, spiritual books. And I'm like, okay, what now? And I'm looking around at all these spiritual books. And here on a high shelf is just this white binder. It doesn't have any title on it. It's a book just sticking on the foot with just a white binder, no title, no nothing, and it basically goes that one. Right. So I pull that down, and on the cover it says something like Beaugolais 1943, and I'm like, Beaugolais 1943. What's with that? You know, why am I? Why do I have a book in my hand called Beaugolais 1943? So I open it up and I start reading the introduction, and what it was three Jewish girls during World War II in Holland were asking a angel why this war was happening. Okay, and the angel was answering that, and they were keeping notes of what the angel was saying. And then two of them got caught by the Nazis. They had hidden the transcripts for this book somewhere, and one of them survived. And after the war, went back and got the transcripts and turned it into a book. And that's what that was all about. And I read it; it was
wow.
fascinating. So
Wow.
yeah,
Just
don't
what you need.
it, don't ignore that inner feeling in your at your fifth chakra. You know, pay attention to it because
I
it's
agree.
talking to you.
I agree. I fully, fully, fully agree. Got to learn how to start trusting our intuition. Many of us don't, but that's how we practice discernment. God speaks to us through our intuition. But if your intuition is blocked and your mind is crazy, you're going to hear nothing. And then you're going to make all sorts of rash decisions that aren't meant to be there. So I want to just say, yeah, it's a journey. We're growing. We've got to muscle up, buttercup, the inner muscle, not the
Yeah,
pumpy ones.
you know,
And yeah,
and even if you don't trust your intuition, give it give it the benefit of the doubt. Like
yeah,
what I
absolutely.
do on the books I read, I do it by feel. It's
Yeah,
like I'll pick up the
absolutely.
book and look at it and then I'll feel it and see how it feels to me. And if it doesn't feel right, I won't look at it. You know, so you can do that
Exactly.
with little things. Like oh, should I go to the store now or later? Or um, you know, th- I do it with books, and I've been led to some incredible books. I mean, they're just a lot of them are flyers that you just wouldn't find in any one place. You know, but yeah, just give it the benefit of the doubt. When you consult your feeling, consult your gut. How does that feel? How would that feel if I did this? How would that feel if do I feel like going to this party? Do I feel like going, you know, trust your feelings a little better and they will start guiding you better.
Exactly. It's just we've got to learn, as you said, that inner muscle that we've got to practice: discernment, intuition, spiritual consciousness, all of these beautiful things. Yay, Jerry, it's so fun. Really enjoy having you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining us again. And we will see you hopefully in 4 weeks from now.
Okay. I'll have
Uh,
either a story or some transcripts. I don't think I read some of these transcripts with some of the psychotic prisoners, did I?
we have read some transcripts before, but I'm sure you have plenty.
Oh, I've got
So
plenty.
I'm sure we've definitely those are fascinating. For those of you who haven't actually listened to or heard those previous shows with Jerry, where he actually reads the transcripts of his patients in these what do you call them? Psych wards. I mean, it's just
Strike words.
like
Yeah.
psych wards. I mean, yeah, sounds like a very dangerous place. Not a place I want to be hanging out at.
Well,
Very much, very
it could be, but they make it out as much more dangerous than what it really is.
true. It's actually true when you're looking. But guys, if you ever, how crazy was that? We interviewed the guy. I can't remember his name offhand now. With you, Jerry, a few months ago, and he actually lived a real life. One flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Yeah, yeah.
That guy, and
Brian.
he was locked up in this maximum security place for the criminally insane, and he was completely sane. So you can imagine the stories. This guy, we must bring that guy onto the show again, Jerry. We must bring him on again.
You want to bring him on
I'd love
again?
to speak with him again. Yeah, for sure,
Okay.
for sure. He's a great guy to talk to. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what is happening in there? I mean, if you guys, I'm sorry, there are so many people I don't always remember their names. But if you go, it's been a couple of months back now, maybe 4 months ago, we did a show with that. I don't know if any of the mods can pick it up there in the playlist. But if you look on Aquarius Rising Africa, Jerry's got a playlist. There's a playlist of Jerry Marzinsky. All our shows in playlists because we make it easier for you. You see. So now go check Jerry's playlist and go. That was incredible. That actually was that was like one of my the shows that went, what the heck, man. Anyway, we
Okay.
we, we live and learn. And
I'll see if I can get him on again next month. 'Cause he's got some
yeah,
stories.
that'll be cool.
They won't let you go on these state hospital grounds. You can't just walk on there. They won't let you in. But he's got the inside scoop of what it's like, what the psychiatrists are like, what the psychiatric mafia is like, what those meds are like, and what these places look like, what they feel like,
Yeah.
and what they actually do. So we can bring
Well,
them on. Now, do you have the ability to take questions from the audience?
yes, they are in the chat room. So if you got, what do you want to do a Q&A next week or next month then?
Yeah, let's do a Q&A on him. So between us, we can answer questions. Give
There
the
you have
audience
it,
a
guys.
chance. The what?
No, I'm talking to the audience, and I'm sure they're very happy to be able to have a Q&A with you. So next month we'll do a Q&A and hopefully have our, I'm sorry, I really don't remember the gentleman's name. And in fact, I do believe I actually have bought his book. He's got a book. And there that I think I will
About meth.
definitely, uh, yeah, and have a look. What is this here? Okay, I think this might be the show here that your hands popped on. Yeah, there we go. Jerry's
The meth.
playlist. Check it out. Okay. Okay, guys and gals, thank you so much for joining us. It's always fun hanging out with you, Jerry. It's like listening to these crazy stories as a kid, when your uncle comes to visit and you like sit there eating your popcorn, listening to every word. It's like, what's next?
Oh,
Okay,
good.
that's
I'm glad.
fantastic.
Okay, my website is
Exactly.
jerrymarzinsky.com. We got
Yes, there it is.
hundreds of videos there from different people, uh, people who've experienced schizophrenia. Uh, more information about the voices and all kinds of topics on the psychiatric mafia.
Yeah, the
Feel free to
psychiatric
go there
mafias.
and feel free to go there and
Yes,
browse around.
browse around, check it out, and then get your questions ready. Arm yourself with questions, and Jerry, you'll be answering next month.
Okay,
Yeah,
that'd be good to interact with the audience.
that's fun. We look forward to that. You see, guys, you just have fabulous things happening here with our. This is why I say I'm the hostess with the mostest. You see, because with guests like this, how can you not be the hostess with the mostest? Thank you, Jerry.
All right,
Always
thank you much.
fun to have you. Take
All
care,
right.
guys. God bless you all. I'll see you all tomorrow, okay?